The road to Blackwood Manor was less a path and more a suggestion. A ribbon of crushed stone winding through ancient brooding pines that seemed to stand sentinel against the outside world. Elara gripped the steering wheel, her knuckles white, the last vestiges of civilization fading in her rearview mirror with every tight curve and shadowed dip. The air, crisp and carrying the damp scent of earth and pine needles, felt different here, wilder, as if the very atmosphere held secrets whispered down through centuries. She'd accepted the commission on a whim, a desperate need for quiet and purpose, after a particularly draining year in the city. Cataloging the legendary library of Blackwood Manor, reputed to hold one of Scotland's finest private collections of rare manuscripts, promised solitude and intellectual balm. She hadn't anticipated the frisson of unease, or the sudden, prickling sense of anticipation that had begun to simmer beneath her professional resolve the moment she'd passed the moss-laden stone gates. The manor itself emerged from a shroud of mist, a formidable silhouette against a pewter sky. Constructed of dark local stone, its turrets and gables rose like a sleeping beast, ancient and magnificent. Rain, fine and persistent, began to fall as she pulled into the gravel drive, the sound a soft shush against the windows. The silence that followed the engine's cut was profound, broken only by the drip of water from the eaves and the distant cry of a hawk. Taking a deep breath, Elara unbuckled her seatbelt. Her heart hammered a slow, insistent rhythm against her ribs. This wasn't just a job. It felt like an entry into another world. As she stepped out, the damp chill seeped into her bones, but it was quickly replaced by a strange warmth as she took in the details. The intricate carvings around the massive oak door, the ivy clinging stubbornly to the walls, the faint, earthy smell that spoke of history and neglect, and something else she couldn't quite name. Before she could even lift her hand to the heavy brass knocker, the door swung inward, revealing a man standing framed in the cavernous hallway. He was a study in contrasts, dark hair, almost black, falling carelessly across a high forehead, eyes the color of storm-swept sea, and a mouth that, even in repose, hinted at a wry amusement. He wore a dark, form-fitting sweater that emphasized the breadth of his shoulders and the lean line of his body. He wasn't overtly handsome in a conventional sense, but there was an intensity about him, a raw, magnetic power that instantly seized Elara's attention. He was the kind of man who didn't just occupy a space, he commanded it. "Miss Vance, I presume?" His voice was a low rumble, rich and textured, like aged whiskey. It sent a shiver down her spine that had nothing to do with the cold. "Mr. Thorne?" She managed, her voice a little breathier than she intended. She had only corresponded with him via email, brief, formal exchanges about her arrival and the scope of the project. He had signed off simply as Rhys Thorne, Blackwood Manor. She had pictured an elderly, perhaps eccentric scholar. This man was anything but. He offered a slow, deliberate smile that didn't quite reach his eyes, which remained watchful, assessing. "Indeed. Welcome to Blackwood. Forgive my lack of conventional greeting. The staff are off for the weekend. I prefer the quiet, and assumed you might too." He stepped aside, a gesture that was both inviting and subtly challenging. Elara walked past him into the echoing hall, acutely aware of his proximity. The air around him carried a scent she couldn't place, something woody, a hint of spice, and an underlying warmth that was distinctly masculine. It was intoxicating. The hall was vast, dimly lit by the flickering flames of a grand fireplace and the faint light filtering through tall leaded windows. Tapestries depicting ancient hunting scenes adorned the walls, and a grand staircase spiraled upwards into shadow. Dust motes danced in the sparse beams of light, lending an ethereal quality to the scene. "Your room is ready," Rhys said, closing the door with a soft thud that sealed them in. The sound resonated in the quiet, making the silence even more profound. "I imagine you'd like to settle in before we discuss your work." He led her through a labyrinth of dimly lit corridors, the floorboards creaking softly under their feet. Elara found herself studying the way his dark hair brushed the collar of his sweater, the elegant line of his neck, the confident stride that seemed to belong to this ancient house. He moved with a quiet power, like a predator at ease in its domain. Her room was in a wing overlooking a wild, overgrown garden. It was spacious and elegant, with high ceilings, a four-poster bed draped in heavy velvet, and a large bay window offering a dramatic view of the rain-swept landscape. A fire had been laid in the hearth, and now crackled merrily, casting a warm orange glow across the antique furnishings. "I hope this is to your liking," Rhys said, his voice softer now, less formal. He gestured around the room. "The library's on the ground floor, through the main drawing room. We can start there tomorrow morning if you wish. For now I've taken the liberty of arranging a light supper for us in the small dining room at 8. Would that be acceptable?" "Perfectly," Elara managed, surprised by the sudden intimacy of the proposed dinner. She had expected to be left to her own devices, perhaps to eat alone or with a housekeeper. "Thank you, Mr. Thorne." "Rhys," he corrected gently, his eyes meeting hers, holding them. There was a directness in his gaze that was both unnerving and deeply compelling. It felt as if he could see right through her carefully constructed facade, straight into the nervous flutter of her heart. "Please, Elara, we're quite isolated here. Formality feels rather unsuited." A blush crept up Elara's neck. "Rhys," she repeated, tasting the name, finding it surprisingly pleasant on her tongue. He gave her another one of those slow, almost imperceptible smiles, a subtle curve of his lips that hinted at unspoken depths. "I'll leave you to your unpacking. I'll send a pot of tea up shortly." With that, he turned and was gone, leaving behind only the fading scent of wood smoke and a lingering sense of his presence. Elara stood for a long moment, the warmth of the fire a pleasant contrast to the chill that had been in her bones. She walked to the window, watching the rain blur the outlines of the ancient trees. The manor felt alive, imbued with a silent energy that both thrilled and intimidated her. And Rhys Thorne? He was an enigma, a captivating presence that had instantly made her forget her intention for quiet solitude. She unpacked slowly, her mind replaying their brief interactions. The way his eyes had lingered, the low timbre of his voice, the unexpected warmth of his smile. She felt a spark of something she hadn't felt in years, a tremor of excitement, a keen awareness of herself as a woman, not just an archivist. When the tea arrived, carried by a silent elderly man she hadn't seen before, perhaps the staff who were only off for the weekend in Rhys's unique phrasing, she gratefully poured a cup, savoring the warmth against her hands. The tea was a rich, dark brew, smelling faintly of bergamot and something else, something exotic. She sat by the fire, letting the warmth soak into her. The crackle and pop of the flames a soothing counterpoint to the quiet thrumming of her own pulse. As the hour for dinner approached, Elara found herself dressing with unusual care. She chose a simple dark green dress, soft and flowing, that subtly highlighted the curve of her waist and the swell of her breasts. She pulled her auburn hair back into a loose knot, leaving a few tendrils to frame her face. A touch of lipstick, a hint of perfume, she rarely bothered with such things in her daily life. But tonight, an instinct she hadn't known she possessed urged her to make an effort. She wanted to be seen, truly seen, by Rhys Thorne. Promptly at 8, a soft knock came at her door. It was Rhys. He had changed into a dark, tailored jacket that made him look even more formidable, more elegant. His eyes, as they swept over her, seemed to darken, a subtle shift that made her heart skip. "You look striking, Elara," he said, the words a low murmur that sent a fresh shiver through her. There was no casual compliment in his tone, but rather a deep appreciation, a silent acknowledgement of her effort. "Thank you," she replied, feeling a blush rise again. "You too, Rhys." He offered his arm, a gesture both old-fashioned and charming, and she took it, her fingers brushing against the warm fabric of his jacket. The contact was brief, yet it sent a jolt through her, a small electric shock that left her tingling. The small dining room was intimate, lit by candelabras and a roaring fire. A polished mahogany table was set for two, gleaming with silver and crystal. The scent of roasted lamb and herbs filled the air, rich and inviting. Dinner was a revelation. Reese was a captivating conversationalist, knowledgeable about everything from ancient history to modern art, yet he listened intently when she spoke, his gaze steady and focused. He asked about her work, her passions, her life outside of archives, and she found herself opening up to him in a way she rarely did with strangers. He spoke of Blackwood Manor with a quiet reverence, sharing snippets of its long, storied past, of ancestors who had been scholars and poets, warriors and lovers. "This place has a soul," he said, gesturing around the room with a graceful hand. "It remembers everything. The laughter, the tears, the whispered secrets in the dead of night." His eyes met hers across the flickering candlelight, and for a moment, Elara felt as if he wasn't just talking about the manor, but about the secrets stirring between them. She felt herself relaxing, drawn into his orbit, the initial nervousness replaced by a growing fascination. The wine, a rich Bordeaux, flowed freely, warming her from the inside out, loosening the edges of her reserve. After dessert, a delicate berry tart, Reese suggested they move to the library for a brandy. Elara readily agreed, eager for more time in his company. The library was everything she had imagined and more. Floor-to-ceiling bookshelves lined every wall, overflowing with books that seemed to hum with untold stories. The air was thick with the scent of old paper, leather, and cedar. A vast fireplace, even grander than the one in the hall, dominated one wall, its flames casting dancing shadows across the spines of ancient tomes. Reese poured 2 glasses of amber liquid from a crystal decanter. "Cognac," he explained, handing her a glass. "A particular favorite of my grandfather. He believed it aided contemplation." They settled into deep leather armchairs by the fire, the silence between them now comfortable, imbued with a shared intimacy. The brandy was smooth, fiery, spreading a delightful warmth through Elara's chest. "So, you're the keeper of these silent stories," Reese said, his voice a low murmur that seemed to blend with the crackle of the fire. He gestured to the books. "What draws you to them, Elara?" "The past," she replied, swirling the cognac in her glass. "The voices that are no longer heard, except through these pages. There's a certain magic in holding something that someone centuries ago touched, thought about, poured their soul into. It's like time travel, a connection across the ages." "A connection," he echoed, his eyes fixed on hers. "A very human need, wouldn't you say? To connect." His gaze was intense, making her feel utterly exposed, yet strangely exhilarated. She felt a flush rise to her cheeks, the heat not entirely from the brandy. "Yes," she whispered. "A very human need indeed." He leaned forward slightly, his elbow resting on his knee, his posture relaxed, yet radiating a contained power. "And what kind of connections do you seek, Elara Vance, with the ghosts of the past, or something more tangible?" The question hung in the air, charged with unspoken meaning. Elara's breath hitched. She felt the blood thrumming in her veins, a wild, insistent rhythm. His eyes, the color of a stormy sea, held hers, delving deep, searching. She felt a profound sense of yearning, a desire to shed the layers of convention and simply be honest. "Tangible," she admitted, her voice barely audible. I think I'm ready for something tangible." A slow smile spread across his face, not the guarded one from before, but a genuine, breathtaking curve of his lips that reached his eyes, making them sparkle with a hidden fire. He placed his glass down on the small table between them, the click of crystal against wood sounding unnaturally loud in the quiet room. He didn't move, yet the air between them thickened, becoming almost palpable, charged with an undeniable current. Elara felt her skin prickle, her senses heightened. She could smell the faint scent of his cologne, musky and alluring, mixed with the rich aroma of the books and the crackle of the fire. Her gaze was drawn to his mouth, the full, sensual curve of his lower lip. A sudden, fierce longing bloomed in her chest, a heat that began to spread through her limbs. Reese reached out, slowly, deliberately, and picked up a heavy, leather-bound volume from the table beside her. It was an ancient collection of romantic poetry. His thumb traced the embossed title, his fingers brushing the worn leather. "Sometimes," he murmured, his voice now a soft caress, The most profound connections begin not with grand gestures, but with the quietest of whispers. His gaze lifted from the book to her face, warm and heavy, full of a promise that made her tremble. He held her eyes, a silent conversation passing between them, a language of desire and unspoken yearning. The space between them seemed to shrink, the air thick with anticipation. Ilara found herself unable to breathe, her heart pounding a frantic drum against her ribs. She wanted him to move, to touch her, to bridge the small, agonizing distance that separated them. He didn't move, not yet. He simply watched her, his eyes dark and intense, as if waiting for a sign, an invitation. And in that silent, charged moment, Ilara knew, with a certainty that resonated deep in her soul, that she would give him whatever he desired. The whispers of Blackwood Manor had indeed begun to stir something within her, something wild and untamed. She felt herself leaning forward, a silent, desperate plea on her lips, her body aching for his touch. The room seemed to tilt, and all she could focus on was him, his eyes, the promise of passion burning within their depths. His eyes, those fathomless pools of midnight and desire, held hers captive. The air crackled between them, thick with unspoken words and undeniable yearning. Ilara felt a tremor run through her, a delicious shiver that started deep within her core and spread outwards, prickling her skin. She had leaned forward, a silent, desperate plea on her lips, her body aching for his touch. The room seemed to tilt, and all she could focus on was him, his eyes, the promise of passion burning within their depth. Then, a subtle shift. The intensity in his gaze softened just a fraction, a thread of tenderness weaving through the raw desire. And he moved. Not with haste, but with a deliberate slowness that only heightened the exquisite tension. He closed the small distance between them, his silhouette momentarily eclipsing the flickering candlelight behind him. Ilara's breath caught in her throat, her chest tight with anticipation. He reached for her, his hand not going to her face or her waist, but to the small of her back, a gentle guiding pressure that drew her infinitesimally closer. Her skin tingled where his fingers brushed her gown, a jolt of electricity that left her trembling. His other hand lifted, his long, elegant fingers tracing the delicate line of her jaw, his thumb brushing over her cheekbone, a feather-light touch that felt like fire. Her eyelids fluttered closed for a moment, savoring the sensation, before she forced them open again, needing to see his face, to witness the journey they were embarking on. His gaze dropped to her mouth, lingering there, for a beat that stretched into an eternity, a silent question, an invitation that resonated with every fiber of her being. She parted her lips slightly, a soft, involuntary sigh escaping her, a silent offering. He groaned, a low, guttural sound that vibrated through her, and then, finally, he leaned down. The first touch of his lips was tentative, a feather-soft brush that sent a wave of exquisite sensation through her. It was a question, an exploration, a delicate dance of breath and anticipation. Ilara's hands, which had been poised uncertainly by her sides, now lifted, finding purchase on the lapels of his velvet smoking jacket. The fabric was soft and rich beneath her fingers, a luxurious contrast to the sudden ferocity of the desire that surged through her veins. He deepened the kiss slowly, exquisitely. His lips moved against hers with a sensual grace that stole her breath, a tender invasion that promised so much more. She responded instinctively, her own lips parting further, inviting him in. A soft moan escaped her throat, lost between their mouths, as his tongue brushed hers, a sweet, startling contact that sent a shiver through her entire body. It was intoxicating, a taste of warmth and spice, of something ancient and wild, perfectly attuned to the whispers of Blackwood Manor. His hand at her back tightened, pulling her flush against him, so close she could feel the hard planes of his chest against her breasts, the warmth of his body seeping into hers. The contact was electric, a sudden, thrilling awareness of their physical proximity. Her hands tightened on his jacket, gripping the fabric as if to anchor herself in the swirling vortex of sensation he was creating. She felt herself leaning to him entirely, surrendering to the intoxicating current that pulled her under. He broke the kiss, pulling back just enough for their foreheads to touch, their breaths mingling in the charged air. His eyes, now slightly hooded, held a raw, unbridled passion that mirrored her own. "Ilara," he whispered, his voice a low rumble that vibrated through her, a sound of pure desire mingled with a surprising tenderness. "You have no idea how long I've waited for you." His words, a soft confession, melted something deep within her, a wall she hadn't even realized she'd erected. It wasn't just physical desire, it was a profound recognition, a sense of having found something she hadn't known she was missing. "Julian," she whispered back, his name feeling foreign and yet utterly right on her tongue. She realized then, with a jolt, that she hadn't known his name until he'd spoken hers. It felt like a secret shared, a new intimacy. He smiled, a slow, sensual curve of his lips that sent another wave of heat through her. "Yes, Ilara." "Julian." He kissed her again, this time, with a fervent intensity that left no room for doubt. It was a kiss that devoured, that claimed, that promised everything. Her fingers tangled in his dark, silken hair, pulling him closer, deepening the kiss until the world outside them ceased to exist. All that mattered was the feel of his mouth on hers, the exquisite pressure of his body against hers, the dizzying rush of sensation. He lifted her, effortlessly, as if she weighed nothing, and Ilara gasped, wrapping her legs around his waist, her arms tightening around his neck. The sudden movement was exhilarating, a wild, untamed thrill that matched the burgeoning desires within her. He carried her through the vast drawing room, past antique furniture that seemed to watch them with silent approval, their footsteps muffled by the thick Persian rugs. The only sound was their ragged breathing, the soft rustle of her gown, and the thumping of her own heart, a frantic drumbeat against her ribs. He carried her out of the drawing room into the hushed expanse of the manor's main hall. Moonlight, cold and silver, streamed through the tall arched windows, casting long, dancing shadows that stretched and swayed like ancient sentinel. The air here was cooler, carrying the faint scent of old wood, beeswax, and something else, something uniquely Blackwood Manor, a whisper of forgotten stories, of lives lived with passion and abandon. Ilara buried her face in the crook of his neck, inhaling his scent, musk, sandalwood, and a primal masculine aroma that made her dizzy with longing. His skin was warm against her cheek, the pulse at his throat thrumming steadily beneath her lips. He moved with a confident stride, his arms strong and secure around her, making her feel utterly cherished and utterly desired. He ascended the grand staircase, each step a soft creak against the old wood, an intimate rhythm in the vast silence. Her eyes, open now, took in the sweeping elegance of the hall, the portraits that lined the walls, their subjects gazing down with an air of timeless aristocracy. But Ilara saw none of them truly, her vision blurred by the intensity of the moment, her focus solely on Julian, on the journey they were undertaking together. At the top of the stairs, a long corridor stretched before them, dimly lit by sconces that cast pools of amber light on the deep crimson wallpaper. He turned, not towards the main wing, but down a less traveled passage, where the air felt even more hushed, more private. Each step was a promise, each breath a silent prayer. He pushed open a heavy dark oak door, and a soft glow spilled out, warm and inviting. He carried her over the threshold, into a room that felt instantly like a sanctuary. It was a bedroom, but unlike any Ilara had ever seen. The dominant feature was a magnificent four-poster bed, draped in rich, dark velvet, its posts carved with intricate, swirling patterns that hinted at ancient myths. A fire crackled merrily in a stone hearth, casting a dancing golden light across the room, chasing away the shadows and infusing the air with a comforting warmth and the scent of burning logs. The walls were adorned with tapestries depicting scenes of mythical forests and hunting parties, their colors muted by time but still vibrant. Plush rugs covered the floor, inviting bare feet. A heavy antique dresser stood against one wall, its surface adorned with an ornate silver candelabra, now glowing softly. Julian carried her to the bed, lowering her gently onto the thick, velvet coverlet. Her legs untangled from his waist, her feet finding the soft bedding. He didn't release her immediately, instead leaning over her, his hands still cupping her face, his eyes devouring hers. The firelight played across his features, highlighting the strong line of his jaw, the subtle stubble, the intensity in his gaze. "Beautiful Alara," he murmured, his voice husky with emotion. "You are more than I ever dreamed." She reached up, her fingers tracing the sharp line of his cheekbone, the soft texture of his hair near his temple. "And you, Julian?" she whispered, her voice trembling slightly. "You are everything I never knew I wanted." He leaned down again, kissing her slowly, deeply, a kiss that tasted of longing and fulfillment. His lips moved from hers, trailing a path of fire down her jaw, along her throat, to the delicate hollow of her collarbone. Alara arched her back, a soft moan escaping her as his warm breath ghosted over her skin, his lips leaving a trail of pure sensation. His hands moved to the buttons of her gown, his fingers surprisingly deft as he began to unfasten the intricate row that ran down her back. Each button released felt like a liberation, a shedding of the last vestiges of her guarded self. The silk of her gown began to loosen, to shift, revealing glimpses of the pale skin beneath. A wave of vulnerability, thrilling and terrifying, washed over her. He pulled back the fabric of her dress from one shoulder, then the other, his lips following the path of the falling material. He kissed the curve of her shoulder, lingering there, his breath warm against her skin. Alara shivered, not from cold, but from the exquisite pleasure that coursed through her. She felt like a butterfly emerging from a chrysalis, shedding the constraints of her former life, ready to unfurl her wings in the warmth of his gaze. The gown slid down, pooling around her waist, held only by the tight corset beneath. He paused, his eyes traveling over the exposed skin of her shoulders, her décolletage, the swell of her breasts above the restrictive undergarment. His gaze was reverent, admiring, making her feel beautiful in a way she never had before. "So exquisite," he breathed, his voice a low caress. He reached out, his fingers tracing the delicate lace of her corset, then the exposed skin above it. The contrast between the rigid structure and her soft flesh was intensely sensual. He leaned down, placing a series of soft, lingering kisses along the curve of her chest, just above the lace, each one sending a fresh wave of heat through her. Her hands, which had been resting on his shoulders, now slid around his neck, her fingers tangling in the soft hair at his nape. She felt the powerful muscles of his back ripple beneath her touch, the warmth of his skin radiating through his shirt. The scent of him enveloped her, a potent aphrodisiac that made her head swim. He then moved to the ties of her corset, his movements slow and deliberate. Each knot untied a release of tension, a step closer to complete freedom. Alara held her breath, watching his focused expression, the intensity in his eyes as he worked. When the last tie was undone, the corset loosened, allowing her to take a deeper breath, a gasp of air that felt like pure exhilaration. He eased the corset away, letting it fall silently to the floor, joining the silk gown. She was now clad only in her chemise, a thin layer of fine linen that offered little concealment, its delicate fabric clinging to the curves of her body. He looked at her, his gaze sweeping over her form, a silent appreciation that spoke volumes. "Perfect," he murmured, his voice thick with desire. He reached out, his hands gently cupping her face again. He kissed her then, a kiss that was both tender and fiercely passionate, a kiss that promised to ignite every dormant spark within her. Her mouth opened under his, welcoming the intoxicating dance of their tongues, the rhythm of their shared breaths. As their kiss deepened, his hands drifted lower, tracing the delicate curve of her waist, then sliding upwards, beneath the thin fabric of her chemise. Her skin quivered at his touch, goosebumps rising in their wake. His fingers found the soft underside of her breast, circling gently, sending a bolt of pure pleasure straight to her core. A soft whimper escaped her, a sound of pure abandon. He broke the kiss, pulling back just enough to look into her eyes, his own burning with a fierce, possessive love. "Are you ready, Alara?" he whispered, his voice a raw plea, a question that offered her an escape even now, if she desired it. But there weren't any doubts left in Alara's mind. The wildness that Blackwood Manor had awakened within her was now fully unleashed, roaring to life. "Yes, Julian," she breathed, her voice barely audible, but filled with a conviction that resonated deep within her soul. "More than ready." A primal groan rumbled in his chest, and he lowered his head, pressing his lips to the sensitive skin of her neck, trailing kisses downwards, his breath hot against her flesh. His hands were everywhere now, tracing the curves of her body, igniting a trail of fire. He found the hem of her chemise, slowly, deliberately, lifting it upwards, revealing more and more of her skin to the firelight, to his hungry gaze. Alara arched against him, her fingers tangling in his hair, her body a symphony of pure sensation. The delicate linen rose, revealing the smooth expanse of her stomach, the gentle curve of her hips. He kissed each new expanse of skin as it was revealed, his lips and tongue drawing exquisite patterns that left her gasping for breath. Finally the chemise was over her head, tossed aside to join the other garments on the floor. Alara lay before him, completely unclad, bathed in the soft glow of the fire, her skin flushed, her breasts rising and falling with her ragged breaths. She felt utterly exposed, yet utterly cherished, her vulnerability transformed into a powerful, intoxicating strength under his loving gaze. Julian's eyes, dark and intense, devoured every inch of her, his gaze lingering on the soft swell of her breasts, her delicate collarbones, the gentle curve of her stomach. A profound sense of awe and desire filled his features. He reached out, his hand trembling slightly, as he cupped one of her breasts, his thumb brushing over the sensitive peak. A gasp tore from Alara's throat, a wave of pure sensation washing over her. He lowered his head, his mouth closing over her nipple, suckling gently, sending a bolt of pure, unadulterated pleasure through her. Alara cried out, her fingers digging into his shoulders, her body arching upwards, desperate for more. His other hand traced the line of her hip, then moved to her inner thigh, his touch light and teasing, promising further delights. "Julian," she moaned, her voice thick with desire, her hips beginning to move instinctively, seeking the pressure, the warmth of his touch. The world narrowed to the feel of his mouth, the heat of his body, the exquisite torment of his touch. He moved above her then, shedding his own clothes with a swiftness that belied the previous slowness. His velvet jacket, his crisp shirt, his trousers, each piece was discarded, revealing the magnificent expanse of his own body. He was lean and muscled, a testament to strength and grace, his skin tanned and warm in the firelight. Alara's eyes widened, taking in the beauty of him, the raw power that emanated from his form. He knelt above her, his gaze locked with hers, a silent question passing between them. Then, with a tender reverence that made her heart ache, he lowered himself onto the bed beside her, pulling her close, enveloping her in his warmth. Their bare skin met, a thrilling, electrifying contact that sent shivers through every inch of her body. She reveled in the feel of his hard chest against her soft breasts, his muscled legs tangling with hers. He kissed her again, a long, deep kiss that tasted of utter surrender and absolute passion. His hand slid down her back, pressing her closer, until there was no space left between them. Alara gasped into his mouth, her body humming with a desperate burgeoning need. She felt the undeniable presence of him, hard and ready, pressing against her, and a wave of pure, exquisite longing washed over her. "My Alara," he whispered against her lips, his voice raw with emotion. "You are mine, tonight, and always." His words were a promise, a claiming that echoed the wildness of Blackwood Manor, the untamed spirit that had always resided within these ancient walls. And in that moment, Alara knew with a certainty that transcended thought that she was indeed his. Her body arched, a silent invitation, a desperate plea for the ultimate union. The whispers of the manor had stirred something within her, something primal and fierce, and now, With Julian, it was ready to burn. She felt the first tentative press of him, a thrilling heat that promised oblivion and ecstasy, drawing her further into the exquisite depths of their shared desire, ready to be consumed by the fire they had both ignited. This tentative press gave way to a slow, deliberate slide, a breathtaking fullness that made her gasp, a sound swallowed by the soft pillows and the roaring in her ears. He entered her with a grace that belied the fierce hunger in his eyes, a breathtaking union that was both gentle and utterly consuming. It was not just physical, it was an alignment of destinies, a return to a place she hadn't known she'd been yearning for, a completion that resonated deep within her bones. Every nerve ending sang with the exquisite pressure, the perfect fit that made her arch higher, her fingers digging into the strong corded muscles of his back, silently urging him deeper, closer. Julian's breath hitched, a low groan escaping his throat as he settled fully within her, his body trembling with the effort of holding back, of savoring this momentous entry. He leaned down, his forehead resting against hers, their eyes locked in a gaze that held a universe of unspoken longing and fulfillment. "My love," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion, "you are everything." His words were a caress, a balm to her exposed soul, and she felt tears prick at the corners of her eyes, not of sadness, but of an overwhelming joy, a profound sense of belonging that transcended anything she had ever known. He began to move, a primal rhythm, slow and deep at first, exploring the very edges of her surrender. Each thrust was a question, each retreat a promise, and she answered him with her body, arching into him, her hips lifting instinctively to meet his every advance. The ancient bed frame groaned softly in protest, a sympathetic murmur to the symphony of their burgeoning passion. The air around them crackled with an almost visible energy, charged with the scent of their mingled desires, of skin and musk, and something wild and elemental that the manor seemed to amplify. The storm outside intensified, a symphony of wind and rain lashing against the ancient glass of the tall windows, mirroring the tempest that now raged within the confines of their four-poster bed. The fire in the hearth cast dancing shadows, making the ornate carvings of the bedposts seem to writhe, as if the very manor itself was alive, breathing with their passion, its ancient stones absorbing and reflecting the heat they generated. She felt herself unraveling, shedding layers of caution and doubt, becoming utterly, gloriously vulnerable, held safe and worshipped in his embrace. This was more than desire, it was recognition. A soul-deep acknowledgement of a connection that felt both ancient and brand new, audiobook. Her hands moved from his back to tangle in his dark, damp hair, pulling him closer, her lips finding his in a kiss that was both demanding and utterly yielding. His tongue traced the curve of her mouth, then delved within, mimicking the exquisite rhythm of their bodies, a desperate exploration that left her breathless. Julian's movements grew more confident, more urgent, as if he could no longer contain the ferocity of his need for her. His hips drove into hers with a controlled power that sent shivers of pure delight through her. She felt the pressure building, a sweet aching sensation that spiraled from deep within her core, spreading outwards, electrifying every nerve. Her legs wrapped around his waist, pulling him impossibly closer, desperate for more, for everything he had to offer. He leaned back slightly, his eyes still fixed on hers, a dark, consuming fire burn within their depths. He watched her face, tracing the delicate curve of her cheekbone with his thumb, a silent question in his gaze. She answered with a soft moan, a whisper of his name, and a tilt of her head that invited him to take her further, deeper into the exquisite abyss of their shared ecstasy. He understood, his lips curving into a slow, sensual smile that promised oblivion. His pace quickened, a relentless, exhilarating drive that mirrored the frantic beating of her heart. Each thrust was deeper, more potent, finding a new, forgotten depth within her. The tension coiled tighter, a spring pulled taut to its breaking point. Her hips lifted, an involuntary tremor running through her as his rhythm became a pounding drumbeat, an insistent, primal demand. A gasp tore from her throat, then another, as the world exploded into a million shimmering fragments of pure sensation, a cascade of pleasure that ripped through every nerve ending, leaving her breathless, boneless, utterly consumed. She cried out his name, a raw, primal sound that echoed the whispers of the manor, a testament to the fierce, untamed woman she was becoming in his arms. Her body convulsed around him, clinging to him as if he were the only anchor in a storm-tossed sea of sensation. The release was shattering, a sweet oblivion that washed over her in waves, leaving her weak and trembling, her head buried in the hollow of his shoulder. Julian held her close, his own climax following swiftly, a powerful, guttural cry tearing from his chest as he poured himself into her, his body arching, rigid with the force of his release. He collapsed onto her, their bodies slick with effort, the scent of their love-making filling the air, a potent perfume of passion and surrender. His lips found her temple, a tender kiss, a silent promise. She felt his heart thrumming against her breast, a steady, comforting rhythm that grounded her, even as her senses still reeled. For a long time, they lay entwined, their breathing slowly evening out, the storm outside still raging, but their own tempest now a gentle afterglow. She traced the line of his jaw with her fingertip, marveling at the strength she felt emanating from him, the quiet power that had claimed her so completely. He stirred, pressing another kiss to her hair, then shifting slightly to ease his weight, but never breaking their intimate connection. He moved to lie beside her, pulling the heavy velvet quilt over them, tucking her against his side, her head resting on his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. "Are you all right, my love?" he murmured, his voice husky with recent passion, his fingers idly stroking her arm. "More than all right," she whispered back, her voice still a little breathless, a lazy smile playing on her lips. "I feel reborn, like I finally found a part of myself I didn't know was missing." He chuckled softly, a deep, resonant sound that vibrated through her, sending delicious shivers down her spine. "That feeling is mutual. Believe me, you are extraordinary." He turned his head, his lips brushing her hair, then her forehead. "I've waited for you, though I didn't know it, for a lifetime. Or perhaps many lifetimes. This manor, it seems to have known." The mention of the manor brought a fresh wave of understanding. She had felt its ancient presence guiding them, whispering secrets of passion and longing that had culminated in this very moment. It wasn't just a house, it was a living entity, an observer, perhaps even a catalyst. She shifted, lifting her head to look at him, her eyes searching his in the dim firelight. "It feels like fate, like we were always meant to find each other here in this place." His gaze was intense, unwavering. "I believe that with every fiber of my being. And now that I have found you, I have no intention of ever letting you go." His words were not a threat, but a promise, a declaration that settled deep within her, warming her from the inside out. He kissed her again, a slow, lingering kiss that was less about passion and more about devotion, a tender affirmation of their bond. Her lips parted beneath his, inviting him deeper. And though their bodies were sated, the connection between them sparked anew, a gentle rekindling of the embers. Time seemed to lose all meaning. The storm outside eventually began to subside, its fury replaced by a soft, insistent patter against the windows, a soothing lullaby to their shared intimacy. They spoke in hushed tones, sharing fragments of their lives, their dreams, their fears, their voices blending into the comfortable quiet of the room. He told her stories of his travels, of his work, of the quiet solitude he had embraced before she had burst into his life, like a vibrant, irresistible force. She, in turn, spoke of her own journey, the subtle yearning she had always carried, a sense of incompleteness that now, with him, felt utterly filled. As the hours drifted by, a new wave of desire began to stir, a slow-building heat that was different from the first explosive rush. This was a deeper, more knowing hunger, born of their shared vulnerability and the profound connection they had just forged. She felt it bloom within her, a soft ache that yearned for his touch, for the exquisite sensation of him inside her once more. Julian seemed to sense the shift in her, his eyes darkening with renewed desire. He reached out, his hand tracing the curve of her hip, his touch sending a tremor through her. "You feel it too, don't you?" he murmured, his voice a low rumble against her ear. She nodded, unable to speak, her breath catching in her throat as his fingers drifted lower, teasing the sensitive skin of her inner thigh. The embers of passion, far from dying, had merely settled, ready to ignite into a new consuming flame. He shifted, rising slightly above her, propping himself on his elbows, his gaze devouring her in the soft, flickering light. Her hair was a tangled mess against the white pillows. Her lips swollen from his kisses, her eyes shining with an uninhibited desire that thrilled him to his core. He leaned down, capturing her mouth in another deep, searching kiss, his tongue tangling with hers in a dance of renewed hunger. His hand found its way between her legs, his fingers exploring, teasing, igniting the spark into a roaring fire. She gasped, arching into his touch, her body clamoring for more. "Julian," she breathed, her voice a desperate plea. He pulled back just enough to look at her, his eyes blazing. "Say my name again," he commanded softly, his voice rough with need. "Julian," she repeated, her voice stronger now, filled with a primal yearning. "Please." He smiled, a dark, sensual curve of his lips that promised every delicious torment and pleasure. "As you wish, my love." He moved slowly, deliberately, positioning himself above her once more. This time there was a different kind of intensity, a deeper intimacy born of their prior union. He kissed her neck, her collarbone, trailing a path of fire down her skin, making her shiver with anticipation. He took his time, prolonging the exquisite torment, drawing out the moment of re-entry until she was practically begging. And then, with a slow, agonizing push, he was inside her again, a deep, penetrating slide that made her cry out with sheer pleasure. It was even more profound this time, if that were possible. Her body, already awakened, seemed to welcome him with an even greater openness, a deeper embrace. She wrapped her legs around his waist, pulling him in, urging him to take her completely. He began to move, a slower, more deliberate rhythm than before, each thrust a profound declaration of possession and love. He watched her face, the way her eyes fluttered closed, the soft sounds escaping her lips, the subtle clenching of her muscles around him. He wanted to savor every moment, every exquisite sensation, to prolong this dance of two souls intertwined. She felt herself drifting, floating on a sea of pure sensation, her mind emptying of everything but the feel of his body against hers, the scent of him, the sound of his ragged breaths mingling with her own. The manna seemed to hum around them, a benevolent witness to their deepening bond. The whispers she had heard earlier now felt like a chorus of approval, an ancient blessing on their union. Her hands roamed over his back, feeling the ripple of his muscles, the tautness of his skin. She pressed her face into his shoulder, inhaling his scent, a heady mix of their passion and his unique masculine essence. It was intoxicating, addictive, pulling her further into the depths of their shared desire. He leaned down, his lips brushing her ear. "You are magnificent," he whispered, his voice raw with emotion. "My beautiful, fierce woman." His words ignited something primal within her, a spark that had been kindled by the manor's ancient whispers, and now blazed fiercely in response to his adoration. She was fierce, she realized, in her love, in her desire, in her complete surrender to him. The rhythm deepened, quickened, building again to an irresistible crescendo. Her hips rose to meet his, her body instinctively responding to his every move, a perfect symphony of desire. The pressure built once more, spiraling higher and higher, a delicious, unbearable tension that promised release. She felt the familiar trembling begin, the delicious unraveling of her control. Her breath hitched, a soft moan escaping her lips, as Julian's pace intensified, his thrusts becoming more urgent, more demanding. He buried his face in the curve of her neck, his teeth gently nipping at her skin, driving her to the brink. She clung to him, her fingers digging into his shoulders, her body arching high off the bed as the wave broke over her once more. A scream tore from her throat, a wild, uninhibited sound of pure, unadulterated pleasure as orgasm ripped through her, hotter and deeper than before. Her body convulsed around him, clinging fiercely as he rode the wave with her, his own climax following swiftly, a deep, guttural roar as he poured himself into her, his body shuddering with the force of his release. They collapsed together, breathless and sated, their bodies still joined, their hearts beating a furious tattoo against each other. The room was quiet again, save for their ragged breathing and the soft patter of the now gentle rain outside. She was utterly spent, completely undone, yet filled with a profound sense of peace and belonging. Julian held her tightly, pressing soft kisses to her hair, her temple, her lips. He rolled them onto their sides, pulling her close against him, her back nestled against his front, his arm wrapped securely around her waist. She felt the warmth of his body, the steady rhythm of his breathing, and a sense of profound contentment washed over her. She drifted, half asleep, half awake, feeling utterly safe and loved in his embrace. The manor seemed to sigh around them, its ancient walls holding them in a timeless embrace. The whispers were no longer just whispers, they were a song, a melody of love and longing, of ancient passions rekindled. She knew, with a certainty that settled deep into her soul, that this night was only the beginning. The fire they had ignited was not one that would easily be extinguished. It was a flame meant to burn brightly, fiercely, for all their days to come, and she was ready to be consumed by its beautiful, exhilarating heat, ready for whatever tomorrow, and this mysterious manor, would bring. His lips, still warm and tingling with the echoes of their shared song, finally drew back, but only by a breath. Riaz's eyes, dark pools reflecting the distant flicker of the hearth, held hers captive. There was a tender awe there, a nascent wonder that mirrored her own. A soft, knowing smile curved his mouth, a silent question, a boundless promise. "Elara," he murmured, her name a new melody on his tongue. A revelation. She hadn't realized he knew it. But then, perhaps he had always known it, deep in the ancient currents that had drawn them together. The night is young, and yet, it feels as if we have lived a lifetime in this moment. A shiver, not of cold but of profound recognition, traced its way down her spine. "It does," she whispered back, her voice a little breathless, a little shaky. "As if we've been waiting for this lifetime." He chuckled, a low, rich sound that vibrated through her, a balm and an intoxicant. His thumb brushed a feather-light path across her cheekbone, lingering near her ear, sending delicate tendrils of sensation through her. "And now that we've found it," he said, his gaze dropping to her lips, "shall we begin to truly live it?" There was no need for words. She simply leaned into his touch, her eyes closing briefly as she savored the warmth, the quiet certainty that had settled over them. When she opened them again, he was already moving, his hand gently finding hers, intertwining their fingers. He led her away from the roaring hearth, deeper into the manor's hushed embrace. The journey through the labyrinthine corridors was a dance of shadows and soft lamplight. Each step was a silent conversation, a deepening connection. His grip on her hand was firm, reassuring, yet laced with a tender possessiveness that stirred something primal within her. They passed grand tapestries depicting forgotten hunts, portraits whose eyes seemed to follow them with knowing smiles, and ancient chests carved with symbols she felt a strange familiarity with. The very air of the manor, thick with history and the scent of aged wood and phantom roses, seemed to hum with their shared anticipation, whispering secrets of countless nights that had unfolded within its walls. Finally, they arrived at a heavy oak door, intricately carved with swirling patterns that resembled ancient Celtic knots. He paused, turning to face her, his eyes searching hers, seeking any hesitation. There was none, only a boundless eagerness that thrummed in her veins. He lifted her hand, pressing a soft kiss to her knuckles, his lips warm against her skin. "Welcome, Elara," he said, his voice husky, "to where our story truly begins." He pushed the door open, revealing a chamber that seemed pulled from a dream. Moonlight poured through tall, arched windows, illuminating a vast bed draped in rich, dark fabrics. A fire, already lit, crackled softly in a stone hearth, casting dancing shadows on the walls. The air was soft, imbued with the scent of lavender and something else, something uniquely Reese, a blend of ancient forests and warm spices. He didn't rush. He closed the door gently, the soft click echoing in the sudden quiet. Then he turned, his gaze lingering on her, a slow, appreciative journey that made her skin tingle. She felt utterly seen, cherished, desired, in a way she had never experienced. He moved towards her, his steps unhurried, a predator and a lover, and she found herself rooted to the spot, utterly captivated. He reached for her, his hands gently framing her face, his thumbs stroking her cheekbones. His eyes, now closer, held a depth that seemed to encompass eternity. "You are more beautiful than any dream," he whispered, his voice a low rumble. Then, with infinite tenderness, he kissed her again, a deep, slow exploration that stole her breath and ignited a slow burn in her core. Her hands found their way to his chest, feeling the solid warmth of him beneath the fine linen of his shirt. The fabric was soft, but the muscles beneath were taut, powerful. She felt the steady beat of his heart against her palms, a rhythm that soon synchronized with her own. He deepened the kiss, a silent conversation of longing and surrender, of ancient souls recognizing their twin. Slowly, deliberately, he began to undress her. Each button he unfastened, each layer of fabric he peeled away, was an act of reverence. Her silk dress pooled at her feet, a whisper of sound in the quiet room. Then her chemise, delicate lace brushing against her skin before it too joined a silken cascade. She shivered, not from cold, but from the exquisite vulnerability, the thrill of being utterly exposed to his gaze, to his touch. His eyes devoured her, tracing the curves of her body in the soft firelight and moonlight. There was no judgment, only adoration. He knelt before her, his hands cupping her knees, then slowly, sensuously, sliding up her thighs over her hips, until his palms rested gently on her waist. He pulled her closer, pressing a soft kiss to her navel, then slowly rising, his lips charting a path upwards, over her stomach, her ribs, until he reached the hollow of her throat. Each kiss was a spark, igniting a trail of fire across her skin. She, in turn, began to shed his clothes. Her fingers trembled slightly as they unfastened the buttons of his shirt, revealing the broad expanse of his chest, dusted with dark hair. She pressed her face against it, inhaling his scent, a heady mix of earth, man, and something indefinably ancient. She could feel the power latent in him, a primal strength that resonated with her own burgeoning desires. When they both stood naked in the shimmering interplay of firelight and moonlight, it felt not like a beginning, but a homecoming. Their bodies, so different, yet so perfectly complementary, seemed to fit together as if forged from the same cosmic design. He lifted her into his arms, a feat of effortless strength, and carried her to the bed, laying her gently upon the cool, soft sheets. He hovered above her, his gaze unwavering, full of a tenderness that brought tears to her eyes. "Ilara," he whispered again, his voice thick with emotion, "I have waited for you." "And I for you, Reese," she replied, her own voice choked with feeling. "Though I didn't know it, until now." He descended, his body a warm, heavy weight against hers. Their skin met, a symphony of touch and sensation. His lips found hers, demanding and tender, urgent and slow, all at once. His hands explored her, tracing the curves of her hips, the slender length of her thighs, the delicate arch of her back, awakening every nerve ending. She arched into him, her fingers tangling in his dark hair, pulling him closer, desperate for more. The ancient passions he had spoken of were no longer just a concept. They were a living, breathing entity, coursing through their veins. It was a dance of instinct and deep knowing, a recognition that transcended time and memory. Each touch, each kiss, felt like a rediscovery, a reawakening of something that had always been theirs, merely slumbering. They moved together, a slow, deliberate rhythm that built in intensity, a crescendo of whispered words and gasps of pleasure. The world outside the manor, outside this room, ceased to exist. There was only the fire in the hearth, the moon through the window, and the incandescent flame that burned between them, consuming them both in its beautiful, exhilarating heat. As they reached the peak of their shared ecstasy, a wave of sensation unlike anything Ilara had ever experienced washed over her. It wasn't just physical pleasure. It was a spiritual merging, a profound sense of belonging. Images flashed through her mind, glimpses of a woman with her eyes, laughing in a sun-drenched garden with a man who bore Reese's strong profile, a hand-stitched sampler with their initials intertwined, a shared gaze across a crowded ballroom, centuries ago. It was fleeting, dreamlike, but left an indelible imprint, a confirmation of the ancient passion he had spoken of. This wasn't just love, it was destiny. They lay entwined long after the fires of passion had subsided, their bodies heavy with sated desire, their hearts still thrumming with the echoes of their connection. Reese held her close, his chin resting on her head, his breath soft against her hair. She felt utterly safe, utterly cherished, utterly at home. Did you feel it too? She murmured, her voice soft, still heavy with sleep and wonder. He stirred, pressing a kiss to her temple. The echoes? The memories? His voice was raspy with emotion. Yes, Ilara. They were clearer tonight than they have ever been. They whisper of a love that defies time, of souls bound together across ages, always finding each other here, in this manner. She lifted her head, looking into his eyes in the dim light. This manor, it's more than just a house, isn't it? It's a crucible, a keeper of memories. He nodded, his gaze distant, yet deeply connected to her. It is our sanctuary, our destiny. For generations, the Lyrian family, my ancestors, have been drawn to this place, and always, a woman of remarkable spirit, a keeper of ancient knowledge, has found her way here to join them. My great-grandmother spoke of it, of the enduring flame, of the prophecy of two hearts, destined to rekindle the manor's magic, to awaken its true purpose. He smiled, a tender, knowing smile. I believe that prophecy has finally come to pass, my love. With you. A profound sense of peace settled over Ilara. The mystery wasn't terrifying. It was beautiful. It wasn't a burden. It was a legacy. She wasn't just falling in love. She was stepping into her fate, into a story that had been waiting for her, woven into the very fabric of time. They drifted into a deep, dreamless sleep, their bodies pressed together, their souls finally at rest, yet vibrantly alive. When Ilara awoke, the room was bathed in the soft, golden light of morning. Reese was already awake, propped on an elbow, watching her with a gentle intensity that made her heart ache with happiness. He reached out, brushing a stray strand of hair from her face. "Good morning, my love," he whispered, his voice warm as sunlight. "Good morning," she replied, a genuine smile spreading across her face. Everything felt new, vibrant, infused with a magic she had only dreamed of. They spent the morning in quiet intimacy, sharing breakfast in bed, speaking in hushed tones of their lives before this night, their hopes for the future. He spoke of his family's long stewardship of the manor, of the deep connection he felt to its history, of the loneliness he had carried, unknowingly, until she arrived. She told him of her restless spirit, her yearning for something more, for a place where she truly belonged. "I always felt like a piece of a puzzle searching for its missing half," she confessed, tracing patterns on his bare chest. "I traveled, I searched, but nothing ever felt quite right. Until here? Until you." He leaned down and kissed her softly. "And I felt the manor held a secret I couldn't quite decipher, a promise unfulfilled. You are that secret, Ilara. You are the fulfillment." Later, as the sun climbed higher, casting brilliant light through the manor's ancient windows, Reese took her on a tour. This wasn't just a house tour. It was a journey through their shared past, a revelation of their destiny. He showed her a hidden alcove in the library where old family journals spoke of the destined one who would bring light back to the Lyrian line. In a grand drawing room, he pointed out a faint, almost invisible, carving on the mantelpiece. 2 intertwined initials, E and R, identical to the ones Elara had glimpsed in her ecstatic vision. My ancestors often spoke of a timeless love, a bond that transcended generations, Rhys explained, his voice low and reverent. They believed that certain souls were always drawn back to this place, to each other, to continue a story of profound connection. It seems, Elara, that our souls have found their way home, to each other, once more. They walked through the sprawling gardens, now vibrant with the morning dew, past ancient rose bushes and gnarled oak trees. Rhys pointed to a specific spot beneath a majestic willow, a small weathered stone bench. This, he said, pulling her close, is where they say the first Elara and the first Rhys pledged their eternal love. Centuries ago. Elara's eyes welled with tears, a mix of joy and overwhelming emotion. It was all real. The whispers, the song, the ancient passions. They were the threads of a tapestry woven through time, and she and Rhys were the newest, most vibrant patterns. He turned her to face him, his hands cupping her face, his gaze unwavering, full of a love so deep it seemed to resonate with the very foundations of the earth. "Elara," he began, his voice thick with emotion. "This manor, this life, this love, it has been waiting for you. It has been waiting for you. It is day. Will you make this your home, our home, and continue this beautiful ancient story with me for all our days?" Her heart soared, a bird finally finding its nest after a long, arduous flight. There was no hesitation, no doubt, only a resounding, absolute certainty. "Yes, Rhys," she breathed, tears streaming down her face. 1,000 times yes. "I will stay. I will love you. I will build this life with you. Here. Forever." He crushed her to him, a kiss of pure, unadulterated joy. A promise sealed under the ancient willow, witnessed by the silent manor and the echoing spirits of their ancestors. The fire they had ignited was not just a fleeting spark, it was the sacred flame of their shared destiny, burning brightly, fiercely, a beacon for all their days to come. And Elara, finally home, finally loved, finally complete, was ready to be consumed by its beautiful, exhilarating heat, ready for whatever tomorrow, and this mysterious, no longer so mysterious manor, would bring to their endlessly unfolding love story.